If you've ever had to share a bedroom with a brother or sister, I am sure you've used this singular phrase. That's mine, hands off. Get your hands off. So I have 4 sisters and a brother. I had to share a bedroom with a brother who's about 5 years older than me. And he's a big guy, and he would say that to me often. He'd say, Chris, that pocket knife is mine. I know it's on my shelf, but hands off. I better not see you touch that. Or that new chemistry set I got for Christmas. Don't touch it, Chris. It's mine. Hands off. He got this brand new 10-speed Schwinn bicycle with banana seat. Well, not banana seat, but those curved steering. Remember those, Todd? Those old Schwinn bikes. What do you call them? Yes, that. Exactly. He said, don't touch it. That's mine. Brand new bike. I said it to him one time. I got an album for my birthday. I was looking forward to this album for so long, I can't tell you. It was the Monster Mash. Do you remember the Monster? The Monster Mash. It was a graveyard smash. Remember that? And I told Don, that's my album. Hands off. One day I'm walking up to the 2nd floor. He's got the window open, and he has that album. And he goes, Chris, I want to see how far I can Frisbee this album. I said, Don, that's mine. Not anymore. Yes, my brother did that. He repented. He's a good man now. He got saved. He's okay. It's like, oh no, he did that? Yes. Some of you have had those older brothers and sisters. You know what I'm talking about. My sisters, they would often get into arguments. My sister Jean would buy a new pair of pants. My sister Stephanie would be wearing them. Stephanie, those are my pants. You're going to stretch them. It's mine. Give it back. I stayed out of that. Then my mom often would go to the store to get all kind of groceries, but she'd get her own little delight. And she'd get a box of 4 powdered cream horns, put them on the counter, go out and get the rest of the groceries, bring them in, and my brother Don ate all of those too. Yes, my brother Don did that. He's saved now. It's okay. Man, you guys are like, man, your brother Don's bad. Yes, he's bad, very bad. My dad had an office in the basement, and I can remember they would give him stacks of legal pads, yellow legal pads at his office, but he had these really cool fountain pens, and he had calligraphy pens, and he would often use it to make official letters. And I'd go in there sometimes. He goes, Chris, I don't mind you using my stuff, but don't touch my stuff in the office. It's mine for work. Just hands off. We all have those things in life. We want our brothers, our sisters, and other people just to hands off because it's mine. And you know what I'm talking about. You have those things in your life that are yours. Well, did you know there is something in this world that God feels the exact same way about? Something that is His and His alone, and He wants us to keep our grubby hands off of it. So the title is It's Mine, and I want you to open to Deuteronomy 32, 34 through 43. And there's something that He doesn't want you to touch, and when you touch it, it makes Him quite angry. Makes Him quite upset. And I want to see if you can figure it out starting in verse 34. I'll make it pretty obvious. I think I already mentioned it, but act like you didn't hear me mention it. So Deuteronomy 32, starting in verse 34. This is towards the very end of the book of Deuteronomy. Moses is saying pretty much his last important words. And he says some pretty cryptic stuff at the end of his message. And in verse 34, it starts like this. He's quoting God. And God says, "Have I not kept this in reserve? I've sealed it in my vaults." What? Verse 35. "It is mine to avenge. I will repay in due time. Their foot will slip. Their day of disaster is near. Their doom rushes upon them. The Lord will vindicate His people and relent concerning His servants. When He sees their strength is gone and no one is left, slave or free, He will say, now where are their gods? The rock they took refuge in. The gods who ate the fat of their sacrifices and drank the wine of their drink offerings. Let them rise up to help you. Let them give you shelter. See now that I myself am He. There is no God beside me. I put to death, and I bring to life. I have wounded, and I will heal, and no one can deliver out of my hand. I lift my hand to heaven and solemnly swear, as surely as I live forever, when I sharpen my flashing sword, and my hand grasps it in judgment, I will take vengeance on my adversaries and repay those who hate me. I will make my arrows drunk with blood, while my sword devours flesh. The blood of the slain and the captives, the heads of the enemy leaders. Rejoice, you nations, with his people, for he will avenge the blood of his servants. He will take vengeance on his enemies, and he will make atonement for his land and people. So did you notice what it was that is his that you should not touch? Verse 34 says, vengeance. Vengeance. Revenge. Payback to those who have hurt you. That's his. So if God says something is hands off for us, for mankind, and if I were to touch it, would it be considered a sin? Would it be considered sinful? And according to verse 34, is revenge, if I take revenge, is it sin? Paul quotes it in Deuteronomy in Romans 12:19 by saying, do not take revenge. Don't do it. My dear friends, but leave room for God's wrath, for it is written, it is mine to avenge, I will repay, says the Lord. So on reflecting on this, one commentator writes that it's not our job to execute justice on evil people. That is God's prerogative. He will visit his wrath on such people when he deems it right to do so. It's called prerogative power. It's very interesting. In common English law, prerogative power is the authority that is given solely to the king to do two things. The king and king alone. To execute war and when to deploy the troops. That's prerogative power. When to declare war and when to deploy troops. So we have to be very, very careful when we declare war on someone. Unloading wrath on our enemies is presuming upon God's prerogative powers. It is mine. It is mine. Especially if he's choosing to wait. It says in verse 34, I have it in reserve. I have it in my vaults. I'm waiting. Don't touch. This power is not yours to touch. So you can say three things when it comes to revenge. Number one, first and foremost, you're taking something that is not rightfully yours. That's the point. Hands off. Second thing I'd say about revenge is you're wielding a sword you don't have the power to accurately wield. You really don't have the power to wield it. Revenge is an extremely dangerous tool, and it can only be handled by people with spiritual skill. Revenge can also be discipline. Galatians 6:1 said, if someone's caught in a sin, you who are spiritual, restore him. But watch yourself, because when we execute judgment, it's very, very dangerous. Which means rebuke and revenge must be handled in the right way so it will yield the proper results. What is the objective of God's vengeance? To prove how powerful you are? To hurt someone who hurt you? I'm going to get them back because I feel pain. I'm going to make them pay. What does verse 39 say in Deuteronomy? Look what it says. It says, see now that I myself am He. There is no God beside me. I put to death and I bring to life. In other words, his purpose of vengeance is to receive glory back to God. To show off his authority, his strength. And when you take revenge, we need to start saying that common phrase, who died and made you king? When you're in a house and you rip on the kids in your house, or you rip on it, who made you king? When you act like a tyrant at work, who made you king? when you take revenge on someone who hurt you, can I render proper justice to what is really deserved? Because when a human exacts revenge, it's like handing a child a chainsaw. They can only destroy with it, hurting themselves and others. But when God exacts revenge, payback, discipline, it is like handing a surgeon a scalpel. He knows exactly how to cut, so it will both take away the issue, but also help somebody realize that with him they can heal. So let's bring this down to where we are. The spirit of revenge, and I do believe revenge is sin, that means then the spirit of revenge is just as sinful. So when Jesus said, if I lust after a woman, it's as if I've committed adultery, because lust is the spirit of adultery. Same thing with revenge. There's a spirit of revenge, and when I engage that spirit of revenge, I'm guilty. What is the spirit of revenge? I believe it comes in two forms in our culture. Verbal retaliation, emotional retaliation, and hate. And hate. Both are just different forms of wrath, of us unloading wrath. And it's much more subtle than outwardly fighting back. Retaliation is dangerous. And I believe, honestly, retaliation, especially in the marriage, is probably the biggest cause of divorce. My spouse calls me a bad name, I call them something worse, and then it escalates. They shout, I shout back. Curse words fly, doors slam, silence kills. Man, he gets to go out to buddies, so she spends more on a credit card. That'll show him. It's revenge. Wrath can only amp up conflict. It never lessens it, ever. Retaliation never lessens conflict. It's funny, Trevor, I was thinking about the book you gave me, The Spirit of the Rainforest, and they talk about those tribes, and these tribes that are ruled by spiritual deities. The greatest sign that a tribe is infused by demons is complete retaliation. They kill a tribe, and somebody from another tribe who had relatives in that tribe comes and kills them. I'm going to retaliate. It's a terrible, terrible book. Then you have hatred. And you know what hatred is? Hatred is wanting people on the other side of either an argument, a political aisle, to get their comeuppance. And this is dividing our country asunder. They hate Trump? Well, we'll hate Biden. Since a man whistled at me in public, I'll shun all men. Well, since women just shun all men, I'll hate women. It's like punch, counterpunch. We form groups and we punch at each other, trying to dominate each other. And it's just retaliation. It's just vengeance. America, I think, is burning with this fire of revenge. It resides in all of our bellies. That's all social media is revenge online. Twitter is revenge with a thumb. And have you ever noticed most of our favorite movies are all about revenge? Why? Because we want justice our way, and we're the only ones that really know how to administer it. And that's so false. Instead of wrath, God's given us a great tool. Forgiveness. That's really the only tool we should be wielding. God gives us this tool because he knows in our fallenness, wrath is too dangerous of a thing for us to use. Because in our flesh, we lash out. And we're quick to lash out. And lashing out causes other people to retaliate. And you know how easy it is to lash out? It's weird. I have heard people say this often. I'm a man who just tells it like it is. So, if you want to hear the truth, I'm just going to vent. Oh, wow, that's really hard to do, isn't it? Isn't it hard to tell it like it is? We act like it's some noble thing that I can just vent. It's really easy. I've heard people say, wrong me once, shame on you. Wrong me twice, shame on me. We're a family that holds grudges, I want you to know. Wow, you're proud of that? We are so proud of easy things. It's kind of like I've told you the story about this kid, that short little kid, tried out for the football team, couldn't handle the tackling, but he had a lot of money, and his dad bought him this big F-150, had it up, the tires were up, and he had the carburetor going boom, 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 and he can sit in that parking lot, and man, he can push on that accelerator, home, home, home. Wow, that's really hard to do, to push on accelerator. He can't even tackle a guy in a football team. He's not somebody to be feared. We do the same thing with vengeance. It's like going, home, home. Everybody can do that. So you could say forgiveness does different things. Forgiveness is the only tool that is fitting for a person who in the first place deserves wrath. We are allowed, take a breath right now. That breath that you just took is only because Jesus has mercy on you. That's why we're alive today. We are given second chances, third chances, fourth chances, 70 times 7 chances, because Jesus is patient. If Jesus unleashed wrath the moment we messed up, if Jesus unleashed wrath when we failed his expectations, if Jesus unleashed wrath just because we said something the wrong way or we used his name in vain, not one of us would be alive. We would all be like sitting in this auditorium like burnt matchsticks that are just smoldering, charred. However, if we are to represent Jesus, mercy is a must. We've been given it. I want to show you 1 Peter chapter 2. 1 Peter chapter 2. It's right after James. And this, to me, like there's a lot of marks of Christians. Like we could say, we know we're Christians by your love. And sometimes love is really hard to gauge, actually. To me, this is one of those marks or character qualities that only Christians have. And you'll understand what I mean. It's 1 Peter 2, 21 to 25. So Peter's writing to people who are suffering for the name of Christ. And he says, to this you were called. This is 1 Peter 2:21. To this you were called. Why? Because Christ suffered for you, leaving you an example that you should follow his steps. He committed no sin, and no deceit was found in his mouth. That means he didn't curse, lie, slander, gossip. Verse 23, when they hurled their insults at him, Pharisees, people on the street mocking him when he was on the cross, spitting on him, when they hurled their insults on him, he did not retaliate. When he suffered, he made no threats. Instead, he entrusted himself to him who judges justly. Forgiveness is the tool. Second thing, forgiveness is the only thing that changes hearts. And this is really important. If I don't forgive people, then how can I expect people to forgive me in the future when I fail? Because I'll tell you what, we fail all the time. All the time. I was listening to an argument about case law in America and just American jurisprudence, and I was listening to these people talk about the law in America. And one person said one of the greatest things that we have put into place in this country is a person is innocent before they're proven guilty. And a person deserves due process before prosecution. We can't just wield allegations. We can't just make wild speculation and condemn somebody on allegation. We got to go through due process starting with innocence before being proven guilty. And here's the reason why this person said. If we were to allow people on our side who are in power at the time to just lash out on someone based on spurious accusation or because we don't like them or because we want them done away with, how can we ever hope to expect grace when someone levels a false accusation against me when my enemy's in power? If I don't give people grace, I shouldn't expect it when I don't have power. So in a sense, the presumption of innocence is meant to protect me. That's what forgiveness does. It helps me to be let off the hook. And then the third thing, did you just know it's easy to be judgmental and angry and exacting revenge? And it's also very immature. It's very immature. Children have tantrums. Children lash out. Children get red in the face and their fists are like that. Adults are calm. So you could say revenge is the action of someone who wants quick satisfaction. Mercy takes strength. It takes a lot of strength to show mercy. Holding back when you feel wronged, misunderstood, or ignored is a sign of maturity. And it gives other people time to come to their senses. It's actually Christ in you. So you could say, based on these three things, forgiveness is a beautiful, beautiful thing. And our world is desperate for people not to take things so personally. And not to retaliate. And definitely not to slander or gossip. Paul says, as far as it depends on you, live at peace. What he means by that is don't retaliate. But here's the problem with all of this. Doesn't mercy, humility, and patience let evil off the hook? Especially when you watch what's going on. Doesn't it, if I don't lash out, isn't that letting evil win the day? And as we talk about forgiveness and not retaliating, honestly, daily, I have this low-grade fury that wonders, when will evil be dealt with? Is it ever going to be dealt with? When will righteousness win? I used to sing this song from Godspell, and I still kind of do. When things don't make sense, I'll just belt out when I'm out praying. I'll say, when will God save the people? Oh, God of mercy, when? What that means, when is he going to come back and right all these wrongs? I'm tired of waiting. Tired of evil men winning. Even David in Psalm 73, I try to be pure, but it sure seems like the wicked are growing fat, lazy, and wealthy. Doesn't make sense to me. So when is he going to come back? Let's go back to Deuteronomy, and I want to show you three little dinky tiny words that hopefully will sink in. Deuteronomy chapter 32, verse 35. Verse 35, he said, it is mine to avenge. It's mine. We've been talking about it. It's mine. It's mine. I will repay, okay? And then he writes this, in due time, their foot will slip. In due time. And it kind of adds, their foot will slip. So let's talk about both of those. When he says in due time, he means, number one, God says, trust me. I see what's going on. I know what's happening. I'll take care of it. In due time, when everything is in place, when I have everything piled up at the right time, and then when I unleash vengeance, it will result in the most glory possible for me, and I'm waiting for that day. Go to Psalm 50. Psalm 50 is, to me, it expresses this the best. Psalm 50. And Psalm 50 talks, it's the judgment seat. Basically, God is sitting on his throne. He's got a fire around him, which means his throne is a place of purity. And then he's going to have court for two groups of people. The first group of people are going to be his own people. And he's going to judge his people. He's going to judge them for their service and for their loyalty and for their, really, their instead of religion, their worship of him. But it's not about judgment. It's about service. Then he's going to call up in verse 16, if you look at Psalm 50, verse 16 says, to the wicked. God says, first thing he says, what right do you have to recite my laws? Like you use my laws, you take, you say you're a Christian, but you hate my instruction, verse 17, and you cast my words behind you. You say you are, it's just you're a hypocrite. That's what he's saying. And then verse 15, when you see a thief, you join in with him. You try it, you're greedy, you want unjust gain. You throw your lot in with adulterers. You're perverse sexually. Verse 19, you use your mouth for evil and harness your tongue to deceit. You lie. Verse 20, you sit and testify against your brother and slander your own mother's sons. You're gossip and slander. Even your own mother's son, which is a reference to Jesus because he was Mary's son. You take his name in vain. Use his name to sound cool. And then so the wicked does all these things. And look at verse 21. This is a chilling verse. It's one of those verses, if you really let it sink in, oh boy. When you did these things, wicked man, wicked woman, when you did these things and continue to do these things, I kept silent. I'm putting it in a box. And when I keep silent, you think I'm exactly like you, which means I'm getting away with it. You're getting away with it. And I'm kind of wimpy. And he says, no. Look at verse 22. Consider what I just said. You who forget God, or what? I will tear you to pieces. What? Says that in the Bible? Yep, right there, verse 22. So in due time, he's saying, don't worry about it. Second thing about in due time, it says your foot will slip, meaning when this time comes, it will come faster than you can ever imagine. If I'm walking down the street and I'm walking on solid ground and right there is some ice and I don't see it and all of a sudden I slip, whoa, boom, instantaneous. Your foot will slip, meaning when it comes, it will come faster than you can imagine, and when it comes, there will be no escape. It will be over. Theologians call this the imminent return of God. The imminent return. He can come at any time. One theologian says about Jesus' return, it's not like the inevitable final stage in an orderly process, like this has to happen, then this has to happen, and then this has to happen. When all that has to happen, then he'll come. No, it's not that. It's not even the accumulation of progressive steps towards a goal, like, oh, I see these signs and signs. Basically, the imminent return means Jesus is going to come in a dramatic rescue bid where he's going to throw his entire self in a moment to invade. He comes from another land and will invade, and when he invades, it's done. It's over. It's kind of how salvation happens. When I am lost, all of a sudden the Spirit of God invades my soul and my eyes in a moment are open. When Jesus comes back, it's going to be fast. And it's going to include wrath. How do I know it's Jesus? Look at what Deuteronomy 32:36 says. Watch, just follow this along. Again, I'm going to have you open up a few Bible verses, but it's for your good, so you'll see the Bible says it, not me. Because I think we live in a day and age where people say they believe in God, but they won't yet claim Jesus. But it's all about Jesus. Watch how clear it is. So Deuteronomy 32:36, it's in the singular. The Lord will vindicate his people. The Lord, the Master, will vindicate his people. So it's the Master. And then you have verse 39. And then he says, see now, I myself am he. I'm going to do this. It's a singular person. He's going to do it himself. There's no God beside me. I put to death. I bring to life. I have wounded. I will heal. And no one can deliver out of my hand. So who is this? Watch how the New Testament shows us. Go to Matthew 26. First book in the New Testament. Matthew 26, 63 to 65. So Jesus is getting ready to go to the cross. Before he goes to the cross, he is brought before the Sanhedrin, and he's on a court trial, and they bring up false accusations against him. He doesn't open his mouth during the false accusations, and the Pharisees are getting tired of it. Sadducees want to hear from him. So starting in verse 63, basically it says, Jesus remained silent. Then the high priest said, I charge you under oath by the living God. Tell us if you are the Messiah, the Christ, the returning King, the Son of God. Jesus in verse 64 said, "You have said so." He basically said, you just acknowledged it. You said it yourself. That's what that means. Jesus replied, and then he adds an addendum to that. He goes, yes, you just declared I am, but let me add a little addendum to them if it's not clear. I say to all of you, from now on, you will see the Son of Man sitting at the right hand of the Mighty One and coming on the clouds of heaven. Basically, I'm coming back. Let me show you how this happens. Go to the book of Acts, chapter 1. Acts is a historical account of what happened. Eyewitnesses saw this. Look what they saw. So the disciples come to the Mount of Olives. Jesus died, rose again. This is 50 days after Jesus rose again. They come to the Mount of Olives. Jesus, in verse 9, gave them his last words, and then look what verse 9 says in Acts 1. After Jesus said this, he was taken up before their very eyes. What's that mean? Here he was in the flesh, or in his resurrected body. He started floating up into the heaven. It's called the ascension. Before their very eyes, he started going up. And a cloud hid him from their sight. So he went into a cloud and he was no longer seen. Look at verse 10. They were looking intently. Who? The disciples were looking up into the sky as he was going, when suddenly two men dressed in white stood beside them. So two angels appeared. And listen what they said. Men of Galilee, they said, why do you stand here looking into the sky? This, look how exact it is, this same Jesus who has been taken from you into heaven will come back in the same way you have seen him go into heaven. So he ascended, hidden by clouds. He's going to descend, appearing in clouds. Go to 2 Thessalonians, last verse I'll take you to. This is about 5 books to the right. 2 Thessalonians, chapter 1. It's very exact. People say the Bible's so confusing about his return. It's not. It's not. 2 Thessalonians chapter 1, verse 6. He's writing to Christians again who are being persecuted for their faith. Verse 6. God is just. He will pay back trouble to those who trouble you and give relief to you who are troubled and to us as well. When? When is this going to happen? Because I'm tired of it. Oh, this will happen when the Lord Jesus is revealed from heaven in blazing fire with his powerful angels. He will punish those who do not know God and do not obey the gospel of our Lord Jesus. They will be punished with everlasting destruction and shut out from the presence of the Lord and from the glory of his might on the day he comes to be glorified in his holy people and to be marveled at among all those who believed. This includes you because you believe their testimony. Jesus is coming. The sky is going to open. The clouds are going to depart. With a shout, he's going to make his entrance. On the stage, he's patient. He has that day in a box. But when that box is unloaded, it's going to be fierce, final, and he's going to finish it all. And I would say because of this truth, we need godly patience. We need godly patience to let Jesus handle his business in due time. It's not our business. And by exercising your teeny tiny little drip of anger and bluster, you may be blinding someone from the glory of the gospel that's going to keep them out of heaven. If you've been given entrance, our job is to help other people see the beauty of Christ, not to get angry at God. But do you know how mad they make me? Yeah, I do. I want to retaliate. So do I. But don't touch it. It's not yours. God says it's mine. To show you an example, I have a story I want to end with. And I'd like to call up Justin Westrup. And so when I asked Justin Westra to share the story, because he told me all about this story, I said, this story it will perfectly illustrate what I've been trying to say. He said, can you give me time to pray? And I said, sure. And then he called me up. He said, I don't want to do it because this is not about me. I'm not that great a guy. I don't want pats on the back. I said, but Justin, this testimony means testify to the truth of what happened. He said, okay, I can do that. So we have 5 questions I've asked him. He has the answer written so it'll be clear for you to hear. But this is a story about Uric. Before we talk about Uric, I just want to talk about you and Heather as parents. Do you feel you guys are good parents?
Heather and I know that we are not good parents. I know myself better than anyone, and am ashamed at how often I fail every day. I also know that we are called into foster care, and Heather and I were determined right away not to judge birth parents, because we know that we're all one bad decision or momentary lapse in judgment away from disaster. We cannot imagine losing our girls or our children or being separated from them.
So we're going to talk about Uric. Could you tell us who's Uric and what's his story?
Uric was our first foster son. We met Uric January 11th, 2017. He was in rough shape and was badly neglected. We had him for 7 months, and he gained weight very quickly. In a house of all girls, he was my buddy. He was loved deeply by Heather and the girls. During that time, his parents were getting their lives back together. They never missed a visitation or a doctor's appointment. They truly seemed to love him. Heather and I developed a relationship with them at this time also. On August 11, he was reunited with his parents. And although it was sad, Heather and I were very happy for them. We stayed in touch and even watched Uric for quite a while after he returned home. Over the course of that winter, Heather was pregnant and experiencing real complications. By January, things were pretty serious, so we couldn't care for Uric and didn't see him for 9 weeks. We received a phone call that Uric had passed away on March 16. We were crushed. The police opened an investigation. We were still in contact with his parents. In fact, we had a funeral for Uric and had them there. The autopsy took forever. In July, we found out that Uric died from dehydration and was basically starved to death.
When you found out, how did you feel?
I realized that we had been deeply deceived and betrayed. My heart was broken, and it was so hard to look into the eyes of my wife and my daughters and see their pain. I've also never been more angry in my whole life. The pain was deep and undescribable. There was also regret, responsibility, constantly playing back the what-ifs and the if-onlys.
So how did you and Heather decide to treat the parents with that anger and frustration? How did you decide to treat them?
Heather and I knew somehow, some way, we needed to forgive them both. We knew that it was the only way that we could have peace for our hearts that were so deeply broken and betrayed. We were encouraged to speak at the sentencing and to somehow tell them what monsters they were and how precious Uric was and how sick and twisted a thing that they had done. It sounded pretty good. Heather and I knew that it wouldn't bring him back or ease 1 second of our sweet boy's suffering. So we decided to get them both a Bible instead and made sure they got them from the bailiff.
How do you think your decision, especially not to retaliate, was impacted by your faith in the cross and the gospel?
Well, Romans 12:19 through 21 and Matthew 6:15 are pretty clear and pretty easy to obey when somebody slanders you or gossips behind your back. This, however, seemed different. How could I forgive them? My flesh could think of many things that I wanted to do to both of them. But you see, Uric's injustice was absolutely nothing compared to the atrocity that happened at the cross. John 1 is very clear. Jesus created everything in the universe. That to me means that on day 3 of creation, when he spoke, "Let the earth bring forth trees that bear fruit, that seeds are in itself," Jesus knew at that moment which tree would produce the offspring that would one day be fashioned by man into a cross that he would be nailed to, died on by man's hands in order to save humanity. We're also told in Genesis 3:17 that because of sin, the ground is cursed and will bring forth thorns and thistles. When God's only Son was murdered by sinful man, he was crowned with his own curse that he sent to punish us for our sins. It is truly an amazing comparison. My heart breaks for a little boy who was murdered, innocent and alone, tortured and neglected. God knows exactly how that feels. And we can yawn as we read it. Jesus gave his life so we can live. We all deserve hell for what we've done. But for those who are in Christ, we are forgiven. If your parents decide to put their trust in Jesus for salvation, then that means their sins were paid for on the same day mine were. I believe that with all my heart, and that would truly be the only happy ending to this tragic story.
I know you don't. I know he does not want any acclaim, and that's not why he's up here. But when you talk to Justin, I said, why do you, because he wants to work with our young men and stuff, and he says, why do you want to testify to him? Because I remember you said, because he hung naked on a cross for me. So he said, and ask me to share anytime you want, even though I hate it. I said, all right, Justin. But it's not a game. It's not a game, is it? And salvation has been given to all of us because God crushed his son. And I think what we should do with this today is, number one, is really consider the only reason we're here is because of mercy. So who are we to retaliate? And secondly, I'd say what the response should be is, who in your life do you feel deserves your revenge? Can you forgive them? Have you received Christ's forgiveness? Because Jesus said those who receive his forgiveness can forgive. Don't you agree with that?